may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, I know y'all are so annoyed with me going through and talking about this nonstop, but I just want to fill y'all in because it's a big day for us. Because of all that support over there on Patreon, we've been able to go out there and finally order ourselves a new camera. Now, I understand that this one is not the worst quality, but we are going to get a professional camera coming in for our new studio that we are moving to at the end of this month. So I just want to give a massive, massive thank you for not only the people supporting the show on Patreon, but also everybody that watches these videos, comes out to the premieres, drops likes, leaves comments telling me how stupid I am, because we've come a very long way. We are not done growing in the slightest, and that's because of all the great support that y'all show on these videos literally every single day. Because if you're watching this video right now, you are a sicko, you are a diehard. Trust me, I am just like you, and I have been like you for pretty much ever since I can remember, and I love fantasy football, love diving into it. But thank you so much for everybody coming out here and showing so much support to the channel. But anyway, let's dive into a situation that is going to be just disgusting this upcoming year, to be completely honest. Let's talk about the Denver Broncos wide receivers. And the number one reason that this is going to be gross is obviously not the coaching, obviously not the offensive line. It's the quarterback situation. Okay, so right now, I understand a lot of people are going, well, Mason, they got Teddy Bridgewater. Well, Mason, they may get Aaron Rodgers. Well, yeah, both of those things are true. We'll get to Aaron Rodgers at the end of the video. First, let's discuss what quarterbacks they actually have in Denver right now. Okay, so if you actually look at the projected starter, a lot of people that are around the Denver situation still think that Drew Lock is going to be the quarterback that the Denver Broncos have starting week 1. Now, obviously, you talk to a Broncos fan, they're not wanting to admit that. They want to say that it's 100% going to be Aaron Rodgers, but of course, we'll get to that at the end. And here with Drew Lock, just to kind of show how bad he was last year. Y'all know my favorite stat to look at when we're evaluating these quarterbacks. Obviously, you can't just hone in on one stat, because we understand that if you're trying to compare quarterbacks to each other, situations are wildly different, with coaching dictating so much about the quarterback position, as well as we know that wide receivers, offensive line play, and so much goes into it. But still, I think it is fair to use adjusted yards per attempt to at least get a base guideline on where a quarterback stands with what he did this past season. And here, Drew Lock was actually the 31st quarterback in the NFL in adjusted yards per attempt. Now, the quarterbacks that were directly ahead of him, you had Ben Roethlisberger, Nick Mullins, Cam Newton, Andy Dalton, Tua Tagovailoa, and Daniel Jones. The quarterbacks behind him, Nick Foles, Alex Smith, Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, and Dwayne Haskins. I mean, that is not a situation that you want to be in if you are any pass catcher on this team, because we know that bad quarterbacks, they can produce top-end fantasy assets. I mean, it happens season after season after season. I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, think Terry McLaurin was a top 10 wide receiver last year, while he still was a top 20 wide receiver with atrocious quarterback play in that situation. And you also have Allen Robinson. We understand that you can have those alphas coming out, and even with atrocious quarterback play, they can still have the ceiling to be a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy. But if you look across all those situations, whether it's Allen Robinson, whether it's Terry McLaurin, what you find consistent with those wide receivers that can perform despite horrendous quarterback play is the ability to command 25% of their team's targets. I mean, if you are going to be attached to one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, you better be getting almost every single target in that offense. You better have nobody else there taking anything away from you, because the little that offense is going to be able to put out, you need to be able to capture so much of that. And that's just not the situation that we are going to be looking at in Denver. Now, yes, I mean, you can point to Teddy Bridgewater coming in, but I want to highlight how little the acquisition cost for Teddy Bridgewater actually was for the Denver Broncos, and show that, I mean, it does not mean much for them to go out there and add Teddy Bridgewater to a quarterback room that literally has nothing. Blake Bortles is gone. They had a hole at their backup quarterback position. Obviously, you can't just go into the season with Drew Lock, where you are going to be, I mean, in a very difficult position. And they paid a 6th round draft pick to go get Teddy Bridgewater. And on top of this, Carolina paid the entire contract for Teddy Bridgewater. So if you're looking at Bridgewater as someone the Denver Broncos are investing $3 million into, as well as only a 6th round pick, I mean, that is a significantly smaller investment than 99% of NFL teams have made into the quarterback 2 in their own quarterback room. So don't assume that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be able to come in and be the starting quarterback for this team right away, even if he is, based on what we saw in Carolina and based on what we had with Carolina being willing to just completely move on from him. It's hard to say that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be that much better than Drew Lock. I mean, if this quarterback room stands still today, I think this is a team that easily is a bottom 3 team in the NFL in what they're getting out of their quarterbacks. But one reason you just can't completely overlook this team is the fact that they have extremely talented wide receivers. I mean, Denver, you can make the argument if you attach the age and the long-term outlook for their wide receivers as well as their tight end. I mean, you could make the argument that no team is in a better position right now over the next 5 years than the Denver Broncos with what they have going on. Now, the first wide receiver going in fantasy drafts for the Denver Broncos this year is Courtland Sutton. Now, Courtland Sutton, y'all know that I told y'all not to draft them in a single league last year. I mean, we were so low on Courtland Sutton compared to consensus. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to act like we were right in that. We never got to see if that was a correct or an incorrect call that we made. But Courtland Sutton was being drafted as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. And what we were saying is hey, this quarterback situation is atrocious. On top of this, they bring in significant target competition. Courtland Sutton, a wide receiver, we are avoiding in drafts. And I think, honestly, that take that we had last offseason is not going to change here at all, because Courtland Sutton is going in the same range right now of a Chase Claypool, a Juju Smith-Schuster, and a DJ Chark in drafts. And I think we would prefer having all 3 of those wide receivers over Courtland Sutton if this quarterback situation remains the same. Now, what we have to discuss with Sutton, and this is what so many people got mad at me for saying last year, is the fact that he has never been a top producer like a lot of people want to think he has. I don't understand why. I don't know if it's just this big-bodied wide receiver looks so good on the NFL field that a lot of people think that just has directly translated over to a ton of fantasy production, when in reality it hasn't. So his rookie season, I'm not going to lie, he was very disappointing after this team at the trade deadline pretty much opened up everything for Courtland Sutton. Now, that was back in 2018, so it's going to be very difficult to take that much away from that. And what I would prefer doing is I'd prefer to look at his sophomore year breakout. I don't even want to call it a breakout, because you look at it, he scored about 13.9 fantasy points per game. He was the wide receiver 28 on a per game basis. He had 69 receiving yards. He had a little over 7.5 targets a game, and he had 0.38 touchdowns a game. So this looks like a very mediocre finish. And I understand, guys, I mean, this is what we were saying with Terry McLaurin, essentially. Yes, the quarterback play was atrocious. I mean, he played with Joe Flacco and Drew Lock. You can't get much worse than that. But at the same time, the thesis here with Denver is the quarterback situation this upcoming season won't be much better than that with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater if they don't make a move for Aaron Rodgers. Now, on top of this, while he was the wide receiver 28 in fantasy in 2019, I mean, very similar to what we were saying with Terry McLaurin this year, the problem is, while yes, he overcame very bad quarterback play, he had no competition for targets at all. This is what we were saying at the beginning of the video. We were saying that a wide receiver can be a top wide receiver in fantasy, even with some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL, as long as they have no competition for targets. That's what Courtland Sutton had in 2019, his breakout year. I mean, if you pull up this roster right now, the only players that were able to get over 40 targets this season were Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, Deshaun Hamilton, and Noah Fant. Noah Fant here was a 22-year-old rookie tight end. You do not expect rookie tight ends to see the field, let alone be second on a team in targets. It's ridiculous that the next best wide receiver on this team in targets was Deshaun Hamilton. Now, I know Deshaun Hamilton, a player that a lot of dynasty owners liked coming out of Penn State so many years ago, but regardless, I think we can all agree, one of the worst wide receiver 2s in the NFL, if that's going to be your depth chart. Now, the thesis on avoiding Courtland Sutton going into 2020 simply was, well, the quarterback situation hasn't gotten any better, and on top of this, this team goes out and makes significant investments into the wide receiver position. Here, they decide to go and draft Jerry Jeudy with the 15th pick overall, and then follow it up with their next pick in the second round, drafting KJ Hamler. And I'll be the first person to admit, yes, bringing in these wide receivers is going to make it where Courtland Sutton isn't the focal point of the defense every single play. Of course that is the case. Of course you're going to be expecting the efficiency on a per target basis to go up for Sutton, but the problem is when you bring in this much wide receiver talent, the volume is going to offset it. The volume going down is most likely, at least based on historical research, is going to outweigh the efficiency going up. So it's not a good thing for Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler to come in, which is why when most people were projecting Courtland Sutton to jump up to be a top 24 wide receiver last year, we were fading him. Now, I'm not saying we were right in this. Please, if you think I was wrong, that's a completely fair assessment because we haven't seen how this is going to play out yet. But I'm sitting here going, well, this is an even worse situation than it was last year because now we know how bad the quarterback play is. And on top of this, Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler are now going into year 2. They've got their rookie season under their belt. They should be significantly better in 2021 than they would have been in 2020. So for that reason, I mean, if you are considering drafting someone like Courtland Sutton over a DJ Chark, over a Juju Smith-Schuster, or over Chase Claypool, I mean, please reconsider because I can never get behind that. And now a wide receiver that is his own teammate going back-to-back in drafts in Jerry Jeudy is another wide receiver that, in my opinion, is being slightly overvalued. Because you go through right now, and it's just the same situation copied and pasted over. So with Jerry Jeudy, I understand, guys. I understand the route running. Trust me, this is a wide receiver that I loved in last year's rookie draft class coming out of Alabama. I mean, you could make the argument that he was the best route runner to come out in 2020 as well as in 2019, and possibly you could make the argument with 2018 as well. I mean, he is an elite route runner. But what matters more so is what happened when he was in the situation to succeed in 2020, given the fact that there was nobody on this roster to take significant targets away from him. And what happened with Jerry Jeudy in 2020 was he came out and averaged 9.85 fantasy points per game. This was good for the wide receiver 59 on a points per game basis, a little over 50 yards a game, a little over 7 targets, and just no touchdowns at all, which is a positive thing. We will be the first one to admit for Jerry Jeudy because based on that volume that he had last year, you would expect that the touchdowns will most likely positively regress. So that is a good point for Jerry Jeudy. But if you go through and you look at this roster right now, in 2020, you had Jerry Jeudy with over 100 targets. And then after that, you had Noah Fant, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, Melvin Gordon, and Deshaun Hamilton as the other options in this offense getting 40 targets. Now, I understand, guys, literally a monkey knows that Jerry Jeudy is going to become a better wide receiver in year 2 than he was in year 1. But if we look across this entire situation as well, you can say the same thing about Noah Fant coming into this next year. You can say the same thing about KJ Hamler. KJ Hamler was drafted at 20 years old last year coming out of Penn State. He's going to take a step up. But most importantly, Courtland Sutton is going to come back. Courtland Sutton is going to make this a wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1B situation. And going back to what we said at the beginning of the video, a player can be productive in a situation with a horrible quarterback as long as they're getting 25% of the team targets. But that's not possible here with both Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton as alpha wide receivers, which is why, I mean, unless they get Aaron Rodgers, I think they are both going to be just wide receivers I'm avoiding in fantasy drafts. Now, I know I said it's going to be a wide receiver 1A and a wide receiver 1B scenario, but honestly, I think it may be a 1A, a 1B, and a 1C with Noah Fant as well. Because you look at Noah Fant, and this is a player that I think does have league-breaking potential at the tight end position. Because you remember how good of a prospect he was coming out of Iowa. I mean, he was only 21 years old. He came out after having fantastic production on the same collegiate team that TJ Hawkinson was on. He runs a 4.50 at his 40-yard dash. I mean, he has a SPARQ score that puts him in the 95th percentile. So Noah Fant, an elite level athlete coming out of college, gets drafted in the first round. And we already said that he was second on this team in targets his rookie season. That never happens at the tight end position. And to illustrate this, I mean, you can look at total yards by rookie tight ends in over 20 years. I mean, since the year 2000, Noah Fant is 5th on the all-time rookie tight end leader in yards. So Noah Fant, a fantastic talent. We understand that at the tight end position, you don't expect these players to be significant producers until year 3. Well, Noah Fant has already been that significant producer the past 2 years, so I think he is going to continue to progress, and I think he's another reason why Courtland Sutton and Jeudy don't have that elite level upside unless they do get Aaron Rodgers coming in. Now, of course, we have to discuss Aaron Rodgers just briefly. Okay, so with Rodgers, I mean, it does not matter how much research you go out there and do. I mean, it does not matter what Denver Broncos article, it doesn't matter what you want to read. And I mean, you can pull up some very credible sources like Bleacher Report, and it's funny because they are not talking about anything real. I mean, they'll headline it, possible trade by the Denver Broncos that they offered for Aaron Rodgers. They'll make it sound like the Broncos offered this official trade that somehow got released. You pull it up and you find out that it's just some guy writing a fantasy football article that's just speculating on what could happen, and he has no insight either. So there's no real insight with Aaron Rodgers, to the point where I would say that there is a very little chance that he is getting traded to Denver, except one thing, and one thing in particular. So, I always say, don't listen to what coaches are saying in the media. Don't listen to what we are hearing from beat reporters. Listen to what the team actually does when they can give us a window into their thought process. That is in the NFL draft, and that is through NFL free agency. In this past NFL draft, the Denver Broncos had a choice. They could either take a defensive player or they could draft Justin Fields. And they decided to pass up on Justin Fields for apparently no reason. And that made me think that this is a team that was in line to get Aaron Rodgers. Now, it hasn't happened so far, and because of that, I am a little bit worried in what we previously thought. But please, guys, let me know your opinion in the comment section below, because there's no real insight out there. If you have anything that you think is meaningful, please go to the comment section and let me know. But yeah, thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Essentially, I can't get behind drafting any Denver Broncos wide receiver. I mean, you can draft Noah Fant, but beyond that, any wide receiver, unless Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson are secretly on a plane to Denver right now. I think all these guys are going to be bust in fantasy this year. But please let me know what y'all think. Let me know how stupid I am, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. Thank you so much for everyone joining the flock in Will, Wesley, Ethan, Sabres, Jonah, Austin, Andrew, Doug, Brandon, and Adam. Thank you so much, my dudes.